So hello, everyone. My name is JD Bean. I am Principal Architect for the European Sovereign Cloud. And in that role, my responsibilities include driving the technical design and delivery of the forthcoming AWS European Sovereign Cloud scheduled to launch at the end of this year, 2025. I know there's a tremendous amount of incredible content available for everyone to attend, and I appreciate that you've come and chosen to spend your time prioritizing this session. In this session, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the European Sovereign Cloud. Before we get to that, I want to touch on a few topics that are relevant to AWS digital sovereignty generally. So first and foremost is understanding a bit about what sovereignty requirements are. We've had a lot of conversations with customers, and in those conversations, we've sort of come up with two broader categories within digital sovereignty, and within them, two more narrow topics within each, right? So for data sovereignty, we have found that customers are particularly concerned with data residency. They want to know where all their data is located. They want to control where that data is stored and transferred to at all times. We also see a strong desire from customers around operator access restrictions. Customers want to be sure that neither AWS nor a foreign government can access their data in the cloud. Turning to operational sovereignty, customers are particularly concerned about resiliency and survivability. They want to be sure that they can sustain operations despite geopolitical instability or other extreme events like natural disasters or technical failures. And lastly is independence and transparency. Our customers want to be sure that their data in the cloud meets the operational and assurance requirements of their particular regulated industry, sector, or location. Brings us to the AWS Digital Sovereignty Pledge. This was a pledge rolled out by our now CEO, Matt Garman, a number of years ago. It covers 4 key pillars. That AWS, which has been designed to be sovereign from the get-go, wants to provide customers control over the location of their data, verifiable control over data access, the ability to encrypt all of their data everywhere, all the time, using encryption keys managed inside or outside of the AWS cloud. And lastly, we want to continue to enhance our range of sovereign and resilient options, allowing customers to sustain the operations of their critical workloads through all forms of disruption or potential disconnection. Since releasing this pledge, we've made a number of important customer-centric innovations. I'm not going to walk through and cover each of these. Many of them relate to the announcement about the forthcoming AWS European Sovereign Cloud, and many of them do not. They cover things like our close cooperation with regulators, such as the BSI in Germany. They cover increased transparency and assurance around the AWS Nitro system, which we'll speak about in just a few moments. And they even cover things like static stability for our EC2 instances on AWS Outposts, which we'll also speak about in a bit. AWS has also been recognized as a sovereign cloud champion. So for example, we were honored to be named as a champion in the 2025 Sovereign Cloud Market Radar by Omdia. They're a leading global analyst and advisory firm, and they act as a trusted business advisor to their own customers and clients in over 180 different countries. We're very proud to receive this ranking, covering not only our sovereign by design standard AWS regions, but also the innovations that we've announced coming in the AWS European Sovereign Cloud. So with AWS, we're proud to offer 143 security standards and compliance certifications across our regions. We've been designed from the beginning to be secure and sovereign by design. And we have the most proven operational experience and the highest network availability of any cloud provider. We've been built to serve the needs of customers across the spectrum, including those that have the most security-sensitive needs of any organization in the world. We fundamentally and foundationally believe that in the digital sovereignty debate, there is no sovereignty without a foundational layer of security. So this is a quick review sort of what our global infrastructure regions look like. We have 36 global cloud regions made up of clusters of data centers. We'll speak about that in a bit. There are 114 availability zones comprising these regions, in addition to numerous points of presence and other infrastructure options around the globe. When we talk about a region, that has a very specific meaning at AWS. Our AWS regions are, as I mentioned, composed up of multiple availability zones. This allows us to offer high availability, high scalability, and high fault tolerance for our services, as well as to our customers to build with those primitives to achieve the same outcomes. Within each availability zone, those are made up of discrete, one or more discrete data center locations, each of which that have their own networking and power systems. These are, of course, redundant. When you look a little bit deeper to understand how the AWS global infrastructure plays out for a given set, a particular service, there's three sort of main categories. The first of which are zonal services. These are lower level services like Amazon RDS, our relational database service, Amazon EC2, our elastic compute service, or Amazon EBS, our elastic block storage service. So for these zonal services, the control plane of the service, right, the portion of the service that orchestrates the deployment of resources and responds to commands invoked by a customer, operate across a specific region. The data plane, right, the specific, for example, the resource that is actually deployed, for example, a customer's Amazon EC2 instance or RDS database, are deployed at a zonal level. So they are selected and deployed in a specific availability zone. We also have regional services, and those regional services, things like Amazon S3, SQS, and DynamoDB, operate much like the control plane for our zonal services, but they do so at both the control plane and the data plane level, making them regionally abstracted and running across all of the availability zones in a particular region. And then there's the small minority of services that are our global or edge services. Two excellent examples of these are Route 53, our DNS service, and IAM, our identity and access management services. These services have a control plane that is a single region among our regions, but a data plane that is global, spanning across multiple regions. This allows us to, for example, provide customers with a single account and single account principals that are able to act across our multiple regions through one account and one set of permissions. Similar with Amazon Route 53, it allows us to provide a global DNS system for our customers' resources. So these existing AWS regions are sovereign by design. Right? Customers are able to control the location of their data using our zonal and regional services across 8 AWS regions available in Europe today, including 6 of them, which are present in the EU specifically. We also have designed our systems from the get-go to provide zero operator access. That means that no AWS operator has any technical mechanism of accessing, for example, the contents of a customer's EC2 instance memory. This is provided by the AWS Nitro system and has been validated by a third-party firm, which we'll speak about in just a moment. This also carries through to our encryption services. AWS employees do not have any mechanism to access the plain text encryption keys used in AWS KMS or AWS Cloud HSM. These provide scalable, state-of-the-art encryption services using FIPS 140-2 Level 3 overall validated hardware security modules, and also enable options for our customers to use encryption keys that are actually hosted and controlled outside of the cloud through AWS KMS's external key store feature. And this is a great option for customers who have a compliance need to do this. So a brief moment, I'll just double click into the Nitro system. I think it's a great example of AWS's approach to designing sovereign by design systems. The AWS Nitro system is something that we began work on in 2012. Over many years of sustained investment and innovation, we released it to the world in 2017, and it now forms the underlying platform for every EC2 instance released since the beginning of 2018 and onward. The AWS Nitro system was designed from day one to provide no operator access mechanism of any kind. This is a first-of-its-kind innovation that is operated at scale across all of our regions and every modern EC2 instance released since 2018. In addition to the fact that there are no operator actions that are capable of accessing customer memory, all other operations are performed with secure, authenticated, authorized, logged, administrative APIs. All this is made possible by strong and consistent innovation and investment in dedicated firmware, software, and silicon hardware. We've provided deep dive transparency into the design and security implementation of the AWS Nitro system. As mentioned earlier, we've brought in third parties to validate this design, where they have found no gaps in the Nitro system that would compromise our security claims. And lastly, we've gone ahead and placed a commitment, a contractual commitment to each and every one of our customers right there in the customer agreement for AWS that states plainly that there is no mechanism for an AWS operator or personnel to have access to customer content, as we term it, on AWS Nitro system EC2 instances. We've also offered new innovations in recent years that have pushed the bar forward for customers in digital sovereignty. AWS dedicated local zones are a fantastic example. They offer dedicated infrastructure that allow customers to extend AWS into locations of their choosing. We provide flexibility to allow them to strategically deploy in a specific country or jurisdiction in order to meet their specific regulatory requirements. These dedicated local zones offer many of the same benefits to customers as a local zone. That means you get the elasticity and scalability, pay-as-you-go pricing, and the ability to further establish security and the governance features needed to meet your particular requirements. In addition, customers are also able to enforce particular clearance or criteria around the operators that have physical access to those zones, including things like residency or nationality requirements on those local AWS personnel. Along the same lines, AWS Outposts provides a similar capability, allowing customers at a much smaller scale and much smaller form factor to deploy compute and higher-level AWS services directly in their own data centers. AWS makes this a fully managed offering, but allowing customers to control the physical location and security perimeter for AWS Outposts. Recent innovations in the space have pushed the ball forward, creating new value and new opportunities for our customers, including the ability for Amazon EC2 instances that are launched on an AWS Outpost and backed by an instance store to remain stable in the face of potential disconnection from the parent region that they are connected to. Similarly, in terms of connection resilience, AWS Outposts have also recently announced support for satellite resiliency options, providing the opportunity to have a connection back to a parent region that is separate and independent of local physical links. And lastly, are included additional console integration for third-party storage devices, allowing customers to maintain local copies of block storage, local storage of block storage data through their own on-prem NetApp or Pure Storage devices. Which brings us now to the topic of the AWS European Sovereign Cloud, what it is, what it brings to the table, and some of what sets it apart, as well as what it shares in common with AWS's sovereign by design footing across all of its regions. So AWS European Sovereign Cloud is a net new infrastructure offering that's going to be coming from AWS. It starts and builds upon a foundation of the industry-leading infrastructure that we mentioned earlier. It layers on top the sovereign by design controls that we discussed, things like the Nitro system, things like our key management and encryption offerings. From there, it layers on new innovations, like providing for European operational autonomy and resilience through offering independent infrastructure located in the EU and operated by local operators. And on top of that, it also provides more choice for customers with respect to data residency in the EU, extending the protections of something like customer content to also enable customers to maintain customer-created metadata in the EU. So I'll digress for just one moment before we get to some of the specifics. What does it mean to build a cloud? I have made the mistake, I guess, or perhaps made the right choice, of trying to share what it is that I do for a living with some of my family who have less background in the space. And I will say something to them like, well, I'm building a European sovereign cloud, and they'll generally look at me, smile faintly, and say, that's nice. So I've developed something of an analogy that I think can sometimes be helpful to level set a little bit about what we mean when we say the word cloud. And it's an analogy. So this is a boat. I've actually shown the same picture in previous presentations. I really like this picture for analogies. I don't know why. But this is a boat, and that's an accurate statement. That is a boat. The following is also accurate. These are both boats. When AWS looks at building a cloud, we are building something a lot more like an aircraft carrier than the toy sailboat pictured on the left. So a few things to point out about aircraft carriers. They are immensely different from toy sailboats. They're built to the highest standards. They operate as floating cities effectively. They have accommodations and medical facilities needed to support often thousands of crew members. They maintain deep supply chains, fully functional airports, including aircraft facilities, air traffic control. They are, of course, self-propelled. They have communication systems, command and control systems. In many cases, they contain a nuclear power plant. And perhaps most importantly, they're crewed by deeply expert operational staff that are prepared and equipped to autonomously operate them in some of the most extreme circumstances. This is much more what we mean when we say a cloud. So the AWS European Sovereign Cloud, and we're going to get into a bit of kind of the details of what this is and how it's different, right? It's set to launch by the end of 2025, this year. In Brandenburg, Germany, it will be under a dedicated German parent company with local European leadership and independent governance structures. It will be physically separate and independent from existing AWS regions. It'll have its own identity and access management stack. It will have in-region billing and usage metering systems. As I mentioned, customer content, customer-created metadata will be able to stay within the EU, and the day-to-day operations, technical support, customer service capabilities will be provided exclusively by EU residents who are located in the EU and are subject to EU law. So, as I mentioned, right, we have these concepts of regions. But one thing I didn't ever give a name to is what you call a collection of regions. The technical term for this is an AWS partition. You can find this in some of our documentation. For most customers, it's not a topic that they have to get into because the vast majority of our regions exist within one partition. They share, therefore, things like billing, accounts, and IAM principals and permissions. The AWS European Sovereign Cloud will be the first region launched in a net new AWS partition, a new instantiation, if you will, of AWS, where customers today are able to create one account and then operate very quickly across multiple different AWS regions. The account systems for the European Sovereign Cloud are entirely separate. Customers will need to sign up for new accounts to be able to access the new region located in Germany. There's a number of additional sovereign controls for the AWS European Sovereign Cloud that AWS has recently announced. These include the independent governance structure, which we'll speak about in the next slide. The capability and design principle that the European Sovereign Cloud is designed for indefinite operation, including under extreme circumstances where connectivity between the AWS European Sovereign Cloud and the rest of the world is impeded. To that end, the operators of the cloud will have access to a replica of the relevant AWS source code needed to support continued operations. The cloud will also be protected by a dedicated security operations center, maintaining security oversight for the cloud. And of course, last but not least, is assurance. So we've also announced the forthcoming Sovereign Requirements Framework, which is an assurance framework developed by AWS after careful study of customer and regulatory requirements. It'll help to provide assurance for the underlying controls and protections of the European Sovereign Cloud. So the governance structure. We're setting up net new entities for the European Sovereign Cloud, including a parent company run by a tenured Amazon executive. The first person to serve in that role will be Catherine Renz, who's the vice president of AWS Industries. That person will be assisted by and advised by a security leader, as well as an advisory board containing at least one independent member. These folks will have a responsibility and an obligation to act in the best interests of the European Sovereign Cloud. Beneath that parent company will be a number of subsidiaries, including a research and development subsidiary, an infrastructure subsidiary, and a trust certificate subsidiary. So, as I mentioned, right, we're going to have some separation, some clear separation between our existing regions that are located in Europe and around the world, and the new region that will be located in the European Sovereign Cloud. They will run on physically separate and logically independent infrastructure. They will have the ability to leverage dedicated local zones and AWS outposts, and critically, will be designed, the European Sovereign Cloud, to have no critical dependencies on non-EU infrastructure. The operational autonomy is critical here. AWS has long-running investments and presence in the EU. Some of our most influential services and teams are actually based there, including the team responsible for the Nitro system that I mentioned earlier. We'll be leaning heavily on local staff and putting them in a position to be the sole controllers of all access, support, and operational capabilities within the European Sovereign Cloud. That means EU resident AWS employees located physically in the EU, remaining in control of all the customer service, day-to-day operations, technical support, and all data center operations within the physical facilities. We're also moving things further, as I mentioned, in terms of data residency. So customer content, which is things like the contents of an object you might upload to S3, or the contents of a database in RDS, will stay within the AWS region that a customer selects. And this is what is already available in every AWS region around the world. Where the European Sovereign Cloud will move things further is in providing protections to keep customer-created metadata. That's things like the roles and permissions, resource labels and configurations that are authored by a customer and used to run AWS resources. There's also a few additional capabilities that kind of stand out that are worth double-clicking on for a second. The European Sovereign Cloud will have dedicated networking infrastructure and connectivity from European providers. As well, they'll also have sovereign points of presence, which enable customers to establish direct network connections to AWS European Sovereign Cloud via the Direct Connect service. This allows customers to have an autonomous connection from their data center to the European Sovereign Cloud. In addition, we will also be establishing a dedicated Route 53, a DNS service for the European Sovereign Cloud. This will be based on EU top-level domains and provide scalable domain name system, health checking, web services. Lastly, is the establishment of a European root of trust or a root certificate authority. This will be established in Europe, controlled by the European Sovereign Cloud, allowing things like key material and certificates and all of the identity verification needed for SSL/TLS certificates to be run autonomously within the AWS European Sovereign Cloud without any dependence on resources outside of the EU. Now a bit about kind of what remains the same. So the AWS European Sovereign Cloud will launch with an expansive service portfolio. That'll cover things like compute, storage, database, analytics, networking, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. I have an additional slide that gives you a bit of a click into the full breadth. I warn you, however, due to the limits of our eyes, it's not terribly legible because there's quite a bit that is launching here, right? So European Sovereign Cloud, really critically, is a fully featured AWS cloud. It is not a feature-limited sovereign cloud offering. We're going to offer a broad set of services using the same familiar APIs that customers are able to use today in our global regions. We're also going to support critically important AI and generative AI workloads with Amazon Bedrock, SageMaker, and Q. Another important call out here is the presence of AWS Marketplace, which is going to provide an opportunity for our customers to be able to purchase software from independent software vendors and easily deploy sovereign solutions. I mentioned earlier the capabilities of AWS dedicated local zones and AWS outposts to bring the capabilities of AWS into the locations of a customer's choosing. And that's going to be an important option available to European Sovereign Cloud customers, allowing them to leverage things like the direct connect capabilities I mentioned earlier to provide an autonomous connection between AWS dedicated local zones and AWS outposts with the European Sovereign Cloud. We'll also be launching with a number of partner solutions that are set to launch on the European Sovereign Cloud. We're very proud and very happy to see that we're not going alone in this journey and that we are joined by our critical partners with whom our end customer success is so critically intertwined. So to recap just a bit, the AWS European Sovereign Cloud will launch its first region set in Germany by the end of 2025. We'll be offering this service to all customers across a variety of industries, whether that's government, research organizations, regulated industries like financial services, energy, or telecommunications, or simply the next hot startup that we've yet to hear about. If you take one thing away from this talk, I hope it is this: that everything needed to operate the AWS European Sovereign Cloud is located in the EU. The talent, the technology, the infrastructure, and the leadership. We have a variety of additional resources that you can find on our website, covering releases that detail the specific services we'll be launching, the organizational controls I mentioned earlier, FAQs about the European Sovereign Cloud and digital sovereignty, and of course, the AWS Digital Sovereignty Pledge that I mentioned at the outset of this presentation. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you coming to the talk today, and we'll be around to answer questions after. Thank you.